Hello, friends. Welcome to Looking Up, a podcast for Christian women. I'm here with my co-host, Kathy Pollard. My name is Carla Moore, and we are just excited to have you with us and thankful that you sat down with us and just pull up a chair and get a cup of coffee and join in with our conversation. How are you doing today, Kathy?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think that there's been something really exciting that's happened since the last time we talked.
Yes.
I
became a grandmother since the last time we talked. Our youngest son and his wife, Carl and Emily, had their first child early Friday morning. His name is Rich, and he's perfection.
Of course. How much did he weigh?
8 pounds, 20 and a half inches long.
Do you see any resemblance yet to Carl or Emily?
He looks like Emily.
Does he?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely beautiful. If a boy can be beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited for you. There's just nothing like a grandbaby. It's hard to explain. And I know you understand that now. We've talked about that before, but you just can't know. And it gets even better. There's just nothing like it.
Well, so many people told us that and said things like, you won't be able to put it into words. It'll change your life. It's the most wonderful thing. And then when you experience it, you get what they were talking about. Just my heart felt like it was going to explode, and my cheeks were hurting from grinning so hard. And it's just amazing.
Is he named after someone?
Yes. Rich is from somebody on Emily's side of the family, and Mitchell is Carl's middle name and also Neil's grandpa's name.
Okay. Well, that's meaningful. Well, I'm so happy for y'all. I know he's going to have such wonderful parents and grandparents, and I mean, he's got so much going for him already at 1 week old now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you so much. How about you? What's going on in your world?
Well, we went snowshoeing this weekend, and it was so much fun. Did you know that you can rent snowshoes?
I did not. I'm not as cool as you are.
Well,
you do cool things.
I try to be cool. Don't anyone ask my kids about that. We went up to Estes Park. We had friends here for the weekend. Well, a little bit longer than the weekend. Lance and Robin Riddick were here from Arkansas, and we wanted to show them the mountains. So we went up to Estes Park on Friday, and we had rented snowshoes. You can rent them for just $5. So it's just a neat thing to do. And we were chasing or trying to stay away from that cold front that was coming down, because Sunday and Monday were 9 degrees. That was the high.
Oh, that's cold.
Yeah, it was cold. So Saturday wasn't that bad, and especially up in the mountains. And we went around Rocky Mountain National Park, and we walked around Bear Lake. I think it was Bear Lake. It might have been Dream Lake, but one of those lakes up high. It's probably about 9,500 feet in elevation. So it's frozen solid.
Oh, wow.
And we walked around it with our snowshoes and just had a beautiful day. Some of the time it was snowing on us, and other times the sun was shining, but just the sparkles on the snow. And there's such a hush when there's snow on the ground, and except for the gasping noises that we all made as we're trying to hike up the side of the mountain. But that was what we did this weekend. We enjoyed some time up in the national park and had friends here. So it was a good weekend.
I saw somebody's pictures. I don't know if they were yours or Robin's that were shared, but they were beautiful. Just so pretty. Postcard pretty.
It's hard to beat the beautiful snow. But what's new on your homestead?
I do have news about that also. This has been a big weekend for us.
Good.
So the grandbaby was born on Friday, and then Saturday, a friend of ours, Jeremy Waddell, convinced Neil that we should get a cow. Yeah. So I've been arguing all these, well thought out, well laid out arguments in my mind for about 3 years now. But Jeremy made a remark that if we get a cow, our grandson will have more reasons to come over here.
Yeah, there you go.
So and so now that Neil's a grandpa, he's all mushy, and he just thinks that's a good idea. And so Jeremy actually came over and walked the property and gave us some ideas about where to set things up and where to have the cow and how to get water and electricity, all that kind of stuff. So we're for real. He already knows a farmer that's going to let us come look at his jerseys when we're ready. So,
and all it took was a grandson.
That's right. That's right. So now I'm trying to think of names.
Oh, well,
cow names
for a cow. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, for the longest time, I thought when we got a cow that I would name her Amber. because I've always loved that name. But now I actually know since we moved here, I've since met 2 Ambers, and I don't feel like I can do that to them. So now I have to come up with another name. So I'm tossing around a couple.
Well, won't it kind of depend on what the cow looks like?
Well, I know she'll be a Jersey, so I kind of know what they look like.
Is the Jersey the black and white?
No, they're like a soft brown, really sweet eyes.
Okay, well,
they have a lot of
maybe we can.
They have a lot of cream in their milk, and it's supposed to be more sweet natured.
Well, maybe once you get your cow, because now I'm assuming it's a done deal. It's going to happen. We can post pictures, and you can ask for some suggestions, maybe.
Yes. I'm tossing around names like Clementine or Clover or Gary, our oldest son, suggested I come up with a name from like a Jane Austen novel. So then I thought Emma would be great because that was my grandma. Prudence, that's perfect.
Isn't that kind of a Jane Austen name?
Sounds like it.
I'll confess something here.
Oh dear.
I don't know if you're going to be very disappointed with me.
I'm already there. I don't know if we can still. Are you going to tell me that you've never read one or watched a movie?
I have never read one.
Oh, well, that's okay.
Okay.
I literally just read my first Jane Austen book this year. So
okay. Well, that's
I've only seen
a relief.
all the movies.
We can still be friends.
Now I've owned copies of her books and started them.
Yeah, there's a little bit. It's more difficult reading. It's just a different language, I guess. Not different language, but a different.
Do you know how I was actually able to do it this year?
How?
My husband bought me the most amazing gift. It's called the literary. Oh, now I can't think of the name of it, but it's the literary something society. But basically, it's a box that comes to your door. It's a subscription. It's a box that comes to your door. It contains a classic piece of literature, a beautifully bound copy, and fun little things like mint tea to drink while you read it and stuff like that. But then it has beautifully wrapped presents that you open up when you get to certain pages in the book.
Oh, wow.
Is that not the most amazing thing?
Major points to Neil for that one.
Yeah. And so I know, best gift ever. And so, when you get to page 56, you get to open up. All the presents were different shapes and sizes and wrapped differently. The letters and things had wax seals on them. I mean, it was just absolutely gorgeous.
You're gonna have to put a link to that so I can know what you're talking about.
Wonderful. So the book was Persuasion by Jane Austen. And at first I was just motivated to get to the first page where the gift was, but then because
you're really 8 years old.
Right, exactly. But then I really got into it and actually enjoyed it for the book's sake. So, and now I got all the presents and I feel smarter because I read some good literature.
What kind of presents were they?
One of them was a big Jane Austen cookbook. One of them was this porcelain thing with flowers or roses on it that you put a roll of stamps in, and then there's a slot where you pull out the stamps. One of them was specialty chocolate. And you
said this was a subscription, so do you get another book with
once a quarter? Once a quarter, a new box comes with another piece of classic literature in it.
I wonder if you could do that with like Harry Potter books or something that aren't quite so hard to read.
Maybe so. I don't know. I've never seen anything like this before, this type of subscription box. So I loved it. And I was thinking how cool it would be. I mean, I don't know if I should say this out loud.
Yes, now you have to.
No, I have to.
You can edit
wouldn't that
it
be
out.
Fun if we created something like that for the Bible?
Wow.
Like for the letter, here's your subscription box for Philippians.
Okay.
And have something neat to open when you get to a certain verse, or something.
You have to think that out. Maybe if you did the book of Exodus, you could have some manna and
grasshoppers.
Yeah.
Well, no.
We might be onto something.
Locust is supposed to taste like shrimp, so like we did John the Baptist, locust and wild honey.
Well, we could definitely do wild honey. I could handle that. Well, that's
No, but
interesting.
wouldn't it be neat if you had small things like a pretty little bookmarker, or like some of the wall art was one of the gifts, and little gold envelope shaped bookmark, little places that you slip over your pages in a book that were shaped like a gold envelope, things like that. Those kinds of things would be fun for Bible reading and Bible study too. But I thought, this is genius.
That is. I have never heard of anything like that. I'm so intrigued by that. I'll need to know more about it.
Mm-hmm. So what have you thrifted lately?
I found an antique. Well, I don't know. How old does it have to be considered antique? Like more than 40. Wow.
Just kidding.
Not that much older than you. So moving on from that, I found maybe an antique. It's probably not older than me, but it's a pasta machine. You're still laughing. I can see you. It's a pasta machine, and it's from Italy. Yeah, in fact, it came in this old box, and it's I don't even know how to say the name. Urania, Urania. And the instructions are pasted on the lid of the box, and they're in Italian. So I've had to use Google Translate to see if I could figure out what it was saying. But it has the coolest attachments and a crank twist and a little clamp to hold it down on the table. And so now I have to make pasta.
Yes, you do. Yeah, I have a good recipe for you from Shay Elliott.
Okay. Well, that was what I was telling you earlier about looking up a video online to find out about pasta, how to make pasta. And I wrote down the name of the woman, Lenny or Emmy or something like that. But but I would be interested in that recipe too. But it just looks like a lot of fun, and I love fresh pasta.
Oh, and I'm so excited. You definitely have to share pictures of that.
Yeah, it's very pretty. It's got red and black lettering on it, and it looks fun. And I've seen these at thrift stores before, and I think I've picked one up and I gave it to Micah because he makes fresh pasta. But I decided.
Wait. What did you just say?
Micah makes fresh pasta.
Your youngest son makes fresh pasta. Yes,
he does. He makes a mean fresh pasta and bolognese. In fact, that's what we had for Christmas last year. Christmas lunch, he made pasta bolognese, and it was delicious.
How impressive is that?
Well, he loves to cook, and he likes to experiment with things that I've never made before, like ramen and pork belly and things like that. So he's a good cook. But that's what I thrifted this. I think I paid $11 or $12 for it, and it just looks like fun. I'll send you pictures, and we'll post pictures of it.
I wanted to ask you how much you paid for it, but I didn't know if that'd be tacky.
No, you can. If it's from a thrift store,
then you can ask.
It's an unwritten rule. You can ask how much you paid for something. Yeah, 11 or 12. I can't remember.
So can you fly with that thing? Are we going to see you in May?
Well, it weighs about 50 pounds. So,
I
mean, I guess if I wanted to not bring anything else with me, I could bring it. But yeah,
that's fair.
You'll just have to come here for some fresh pasta.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that'd be easier.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so we were going to talk about some serious stuff today, and maybe just talk about marriage issues and some of the things that we have learned. How many years have y'all been married now?
It'll be 31 in May.
Yeah. What year did you get married? I don't want to do the math. 1992. We married in 1986, and so that we're almost at 37. And so we were you and I were discussing earlier some things that would be relevant and maybe helpful to others to talk about on podcast. And so one of the things that I was thinking about were just if we could go back maybe and talk to our younger selves and say, hey, here's some things that you could do differently or look at differently, or we've talked before about being intentional, and so some of that can really carry over into talking about our marriages. But one of the things that we have learned in counseling situations, and I think John read this in a magazine years and years ago, but we tell people about it as often as we can because it just really it resonated with me, and it made a huge difference in my own marriage and my own life. And I hate to say how long it really took me to understand it, but it's you give your spouse, or anyone really, this can apply in any area of your life, but to give your spouse a gift, and remembering the letters GIFT, whenever your spouse reacts to something in a way that just doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel right, maybe they're cranky about it and you don't understand why, because to you it's not a big deal. You give them a gift, which just means that you consider what's going on to make them react that way. And the gift stands for guilt or inferiority or fear or trauma. So if you kind of think about, for me especially, the fear is what I realized that I was reacting. I hate to use the word inappropriately because that sounds so formal, but if you have an inappropriate reaction to something, and I'll just give an example. There was a time when the boys were little and John was taking some classes in Austin at night, and he would get home. He was supposed to be home like by 8:30 or 9:00. And there were times that he wouldn't get home till 10 or 10:30. And this was before cell phones. Can you even remember that? Just imagine before cell phones, and you couldn't get a hold of each other. And sometimes he would tell me, he would call from the phone there at the school where he was attending, and he would tell me he was headed home. But anyway, if he was late, I would find myself getting angry and angry and angry and just worse and worse. And by the time he got home, I was just mad. And it just seemed so silly when I thought about it later, because what I really wanted was for him to be home. But when he got home, I was mad. And so, you can consider that just an inappropriate reaction. But when I got to thinking about why I felt that way, it was because I was afraid that something had happened to him. And so when I look back at that, and still, even sometimes now when we have conflict, I can tell it's because I'm afraid. And it's happened maybe even more in the last couple of years. If John doesn't answer a text, then of course my mind goes in different directions, considering what happened to him. It has something happened to him, and then I get mad. And it's just so weird. It really is a strange reaction. But when
Glad you're okay, now I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I have told him before, if he texts while he's driving, I said, if something happens to you and you have a wreck and you die, I'm going to come resurrect you, and then I'm going to kill you again, which is probably really a bad thing to say out loud. Did I really just say that out loud?
No.
Yeah. But anyway, it's stopping to think, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? And why is it making me react this way? So I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. And I wrote that down when you said it. And especially looking back at specific situations like the one you mentioned, you can see how anger could be fear driven or guilt driven if you're trying to hide something and you're being questioned about it and you respond in anger, or that makes perfect sense. And I do wish that I had been, told that information a long, long time ago, because you can kind of check your own anger at the door. Not just giving your spouse a gift when they react in anger, but when you're experiencing anger, what's really driving this, and then how to address that specific thing more appropriately.
Right. Because when, that the scripture that says a soft answer turns away wrath, if you're thinking about why is he reacting that way to me, that it does help you to step back and say, oh, okay, well, there's a reason why he's acting that way, and give grace and understand that maybe there's a reason why. It doesn't necessarily have to be your husband, but just people in your life who don't react the way you think they should. So
that's true. That's good. That's really
thinking
good.
about inferiority, if you're not feeling like you measure up, or if you feel threatened by someone else who you think is better than you, or that you think they think that they're better than you, or trauma. I think trauma is a huge one, because there's so many things that happen in our past that carry over into current relationships. So just being intentional and thinking about why is the reaction that I'm getting that doesn't seem right, what's behind it. So I think that's something that will help marriages that we could consider.
That's so true and so practical. And like you said, beyond the marriage relationship, think about that with coworkers, and church relationships, your neighbors, anybody that you spend any amount of time with, really.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's so helpful.
Even elders. I was just thinking about this last night, and knowing that the elders of the congregations where we attend, and they're watching for our souls, and maybe they don't handle things the way we think they should, or they're slower to react in ways that we think they should. But there may be all kinds of things going on that they're fear for our souls. So it just really does make a difference in all different kinds of relationships. So that's one thing I wish I'd known earlier. What is something that you think that you wish you'd known?
I had a couple of different ones, but I'm going to share one of the most recent ones that I just learned from a friend of ours here at Lehman Avenue. Her name is Kelly Nix. Okay. And she shared something in one of our first ladies' Bible classes that we had together since I've been here. And she said, don't bind your quirks on anyone else, especially your spouse. Just because it bothers you doesn't mean it bothers anyone else. And I started thinking about what she was talking about, and how, in little instances, and I think I may have even mentioned this last week or the week before, but little things like pushing your dresser drawers all the way in. It absolutely drives me crazy to see 2 or 3 drawers sticking out a little bit. And that bothers me, but it doesn't bother Neil. He doesn't even see it. But I get aggravated, or I get frustrated, because that's something that I think should be done a certain way. It's a quirk, it's like I looked that word up, a pet peeve. Yeah. And it's a peculiar trait. Sometimes that can be endearing and sometimes not, but it's a trait, not necessarily strange or odd, but a trait peculiar to you, your tastes, your thoughts, your inclinations. And so, because I think things should be a certain way in my mind, why doesn't he think the same way? Why doesn't that bother him? But that's not fair. And it's not fair of me to then get aggravated with him. And if I've said something to him about it and then he still does it, my inclination is to take that personally and get more aggravated about it, when really he's not meaning to overlook it. He just honestly doesn't see it. He's not aware of it. He's not tuned into it. He doesn't think about it the same way I do. So that's a minor example, but there are so many things, that you might have a certain plan that things are going to go a certain way, which kind of bleeds into the other one. When I was first thinking about this, I thought they were one thing, but I think they're really 2 different things, but they're similar. The other one was unspoken expectations. That whole idea of, I thought this was going to go a certain way. In my mind, it played out like this. And, or I envisioned us here, or doing this, or, and it could be things like how we spend our day off each week. What the empty nest was going to look like. Just, I don't know, things like that. But I didn't share that with Neil. I didn't realize that I was even coming up with those expectations in my mind, but I was. And so then if it doesn't go that way, and, I'm thinking on our day off, we're going to ease into the day and cook a big breakfast together and maybe kick around or go do some errands. I've got this really slow, laid back, just hanging out kind of day in mind. Well, he's decided on his day off, he wants to run extra miles. He wants to use that time to spend more time on the treadmill or whatever. And I'm going, what? You don't want to spend time with me? It's just
right.
Those kind of unspoken expectations,
Well, let me give you something to think about that was someone told me. See what you think about this.
Okay.
My friend Christy Pogue told me this several years ago, and I just keep thinking about it. And when you said what you said about expectations, it reminded me. She said that she learned that expectations were just premeditated resentments.
Oh, yes.
What do you think about that?
Oh, yes.
I had to chew on that for a while, because I thought, I don't know if all and maybe not, it's probably not a blanket statement, but I think for the most part, it really is, because I've seen this in our relationship, in John's and mine, how if I don't communicate what my expectation is, then it's always going to be different than what he expected. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not being intentional again about communicating what I would like to see that day or what I would like to do, then it's like I've already decided that I'm going to be resentful because it doesn't happen that way. So it may be a little harsh to say it that way, but it's true. I really think it's true.
It is true. And if we need to differentiate, we're not talking about expectations that God has placed on each of us in marriage. Obviously we expect our husbands to be leaders in the home, to provide, those types of things. We're just talking about all the other things that we might have in our minds. And I think you're right. And I think your personality kind of plays into that as well, because I'm sure that Neil has his own expectations, but he's also a lot more go with the flow. He is very adaptable. He can change his mind, whereas I get kind of set on something in a certain way, whether it's, we've talked about going to this restaurant. So in my mind, I've already ordered the meal, I can taste it.
Yeah.
But then when it's time, he goes, oh, let's go here instead. I'm going, what?
Yeah. I can't taste it anymore.
What?
Yeah.
Why do you do that? So I don't know. Those were just kind of, if I could go back and maybe think some of these things through, and I think the solution might be just communication, I know that's kind of a common marriage thing, but keep talking about everything. Keep talking about your plans. Changes happen in life all the time.
Be flexible.
Yeah, changes to us as individuals and our character and personalities, but also circumstances. And you have to keep having the same conversations because life happens and changes happen, and keep asking questions, plan together, dream together, discuss together. I think that
John is a lot more plan oriented than I am. And he tends to say, okay, tomorrow, what's our plan tomorrow? And I'm still sitting and thinking about, what we did that day. And I don't want to think about tomorrow just yet. And I read somewhere that apparently I'm an Enneagram type 9. And I know some people think that those are not good, but I think that they're kind of fun to look at because I see a lot of those characteristics in me that the type 9 has. And one of them is to not press the person into making decisions. And I thought, wow, that is me.
Duly noted.
Yeah. Yeah, write that down. But, I like to make plans, but I like for them to be flexible but he's like, okay, we're going to wake up at 6:30 and we're going to have coffee at 6:40. And then we're going to take care of emails from 7 until 7:15. And then, and I'm thinking, I'm still, rubbing my head and rubbing the sleep out of my eyes, trying to get my coffee made and he just wakes up, hits the ground running. And it doesn't take me too long, but I've had to learn, okay, let's just talk about this and get it set for tomorrow. And he's happy. And then if it changes, he's okay if things have to change, but it helps him mentally to have a plan for the next day. Right. So anyway,
I think that I've noticed that Neil has started asking more and more, especially within the past couple of years, things like, especially on days off, so what did you have in mind for the day?
Yeah, it's a wise way of saying.
Or what were your plans for the day? And I think he's just trying to accommodate some of these things that we've experienced, and I should be better about asking him that and, communicating more about that instead of in my mind, I've got it all figured out. And I was thinking that you might have settled into a certain pattern that works for you or that you're both comfortable with. But then change happens and you've got to revisit that, what about when your children leave home? What do you think that part of your life is going to look like? Have you even talked about that with your husband and what he thinks that part of your life is going to look like together? One of you might think, oh, now we can get to do a lot more travel. And the other one's going, oh, we can finally stay home. Yeah, start some home projects or, it's just important to talk about those things.
Yeah. And just
having a baby,
Oh, yeah.
Well, it could be big things or it could be little things.
Yeah. Well, another one of the things that I was thinking about that I wish I would have done differently. And, we have to press forward, like you wrote in that great article that you did this week about forgiving ourselves, but just quit looking back and press forward. But one of the things that I wish I hadn't been so bad about was sarcasm. And that was,
Oh, let's not talk about that one.
yeah, right. Let's not talk about that one. The sarcasm can come out. But I think you either speak it or you don't. Do you think that? Because some people just don't understand sarcasm at all. It's almost like a language. Mm-hmm. And I do. It just comes naturally to me. And I remember early in our marriage, I would speak sarcastically to John, and I remember one time in particular that he said, "I really wish that you would not be so sarcastic." And I thought I had this great answer, because I said, "Well, Jesus used sarcasm." And he said, and this just took the wind out of my sails, he said, "Not with the people that he loved." Oh. And, he didn't. And even the sarcasm that Jesus used was completely different than what I was using at the time. But I know that there's a time and place for it, but it just is not something that will build up your relationship. And it's so tempting if you do speak that language. It's just so tempting to revert to, well, I guess you're not going to do that for me when I asked you to do that 5 times. It's just a way of speaking that can really damage and hurt a relationship. And I learned, and I've really tried to not speak that way. And I think I've gotten better at it, but it's still there. It still comes out sometimes, but I wish I had been better about that. I don't think you have a problem with that.
Thank you. You are wrong. It's, y'all are going to think I'm the worst wife ever.
I just think you're real.
Yeah, whether it's cheerfulness or sarcasm, I think I've got that down pat with other people, mm-hmm. but it sure can rear its head in the home. Yeah. So many things.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that Robin told me about this week, that something that they used to do when their kids were younger, she called it couch time. And she said it's just when everyone finally gets home at night, and there may be, she said it's kind of hard to imagine, especially when how things are at 5:00 and everyone's running around and trying to get dinner and homework and all that. But she said 15 minutes that she and Lance would just sit on the couch, and it was just their time, and they would tell the kids, this is mom and dad time, and you can go do this or do that, but you just need to leave us alone so that we can decompress and talk about our day. And she said that there have been studies that show that when kids see their parents in a relationship like that and relying on one another and wanting to be together and enjoying mm-hmm. each other's company, it gives them security, and they like that. And I know that that's true. I've seen lots of kids who don't have that security of knowing that their parents love each other. And so I thought that was just something that was really neat that I wanted to share. So couch time, I guess that can be taken in different ways, but sit on the couch and just enjoy each other's company.
Not couch potato.
Yeah. Sit on the couch together.
That's good. And I firmly believe that children feel way more secure when they see their parents being close and mm-hmm. strong in their relationship, and even affectionate with each other, in right. front of your kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think that's really good.
Yeah, definitely. What mm-hmm. about, I think about anger too. I wish that I had been better about realizing that it's a choice. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to stop and say, I'm just not going to get angry about that, because it's not worth it. And I hope John doesn't listen to this, because he is going to say, hey, you need to be better about that, because it really is just something. If you just stop and say, come on now, just laugh about this. And I'll tell you, this is something funny that happened just a few weeks ago. I hope I didn't already tell you about this, but John and Jordan and Jackson had gone fishing one Saturday, and they were out on the bay, And John got sunburned. His face got sunburned, and a medicine that he's on now makes him more susceptible to it. But it made his lips swell up.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so that was on a Saturday, and something came up on Sunday, and it was really something silly. I can't remember what it was, but it was a conflict that we had. And I was kind of put out with him, and we were sitting in the living room and having this discussion. And I'd look at him, and his lips were puffed out, and I was mad at him, but I could not keep a straight face when he was telling me whatever it was that he was saying that I was not being reasonable about. And I just,
with duck lips.
yes, I finally just lost it because he was, I'd just never seen him with puffy lips before. And I thought, it felt good. It was like this, here I had been upset about whatever it was. And it just was like this weight off my shoulders when I just laughed. And it wasn't because he tried to make me laugh. He really didn't realize that I was laughing at him until I just burst out laughing. But I know some people that have told me, yeah, if you can just laugh about it instead of getting mad about it, it just heads off so much conflict to begin with.
That's so good. I'm still picturing him with the puffy lips.
I did take a picture of him. So maybe.
Oh,
maybe
no.
I will not post that in the group. So
we're not sharing that one.
No, that will not be a sharing picture, but it was funny.
It's so true about nobody can make you feel something. And we might like to justify our anger or our reaction. He made me so mad. But we do choose, you're right. We do choose how to respond. And, we were talking the past couple of days about what we were going to discuss today. So yesterday, Neil said, what are you going to say? And I said, I'm not going to tell you. I am not, no way. And because, then I'd have to, then he's aware of it and all that stuff. And he said, hey, that should be a perk of being married to the podcast host.
Just tell him he has to listen to himself.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of these things that we're talking about, I was looking at some verses, let's let God get a word in edgewise here. And
yeah,
it all goes back to others above self, whether it's what's the source of your reaction, with the gift, whether it's unspoken expectations or binding your quirks on somebody else, sarcasm, all those things, just so much go back to if you're considering the other person, their thoughts, their feelings, their hearts, and how you speak and relate, then it would solve a lot of these things. It would just cut them off at the head. And so I thought of 1 Corinthians 13:5, of course. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not resentful. Kind of addressing the part about the expectations or the disappointments that you might have if things don't go the way you expected. And I found something a little bit interesting with a couple of verses in Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. That's the verse that says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. And then in Romans chapter 12, verse 10, it says, love one another and outdo one another in showing honor. And your version might say, give preference to one another instead of outdo one another. But the word for count others as more significant than yourself in Philippians, and the word for give preference in Romans 12 are the same word. And it does mean with regard, give regard or consideration to, but it also means to lead the way. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge is sometimes I sit back and I want him to be the one to do those things. I want him to, I pray about my attitude or demeanor, and then something doesn't go the way I planned, and I want him to do something different. Well, really, these verses are saying, you lead the way and counting others as more significant than yourselves. And the word significant there literally means better than. yourself, which, you know, can rub us the wrong way, just the very thought of it. But that's what it's saying, that you lead the way in treating them as if they're more important than you, they're better than you. You lead the way in giving preference to another and showing honor. And that means value, worth. You know, you just treasure that relationship so much that it will check all of these things, instead of focusing so much on my expectations, my plans, my thoughts, you know, considering him.
That's so good. And in so many counseling situations, you can see, and I think people in the situation can see when they step back and look, that it can be a vicious cycle of, you hurt my feelings, so I'm going to withhold whatever, my love, my affection, my words. And so then the person that's receiving that is offended, and so they respond with the same kind of treatment, and it's just a vicious cycle of one bad thing after another. And what you were just talking about, leading the way, makes me think of turning the cycle around. And someone has to be the adult. Someone has to take, you know, the initiative to forgive and make things start moving in the other direction and turn it into a better cycle. I don't want to say a happy cycle necessarily, although it would lead to that, but rather than it being something that's hurtful, turn it into outdo one another in serving. You know, I'm going to serve you because I love you. And then in turn, the person that you're serving feels loved and serves you. And so it can be such a good thing when we lead the way in loving and honoring and serving one another. So that's just such a good point.
Well, and Satan wants us to think that, you know, if you do that, you're just making yourself a doormat. And what about your needs? What about your wants? But this is God's plan. And he knows what's best for us. He created marriage. He created us. And you know that when you do yield, you know, in an argument, those rare times, not that we have rare moments,
not that we have arguments,
but those rare times that I actually check myself and I feel sheepish, you know, it's like you just realize, could you be more childish, Kathy Pollard, you know? And if I just stop what I'm doing and give him a hug, it just melts him. It melts me. I feel better. I don't feel like I've given up something to give way. I feel it makes me feel better. And
you've won.
It really, you know, it just
needs to happen by yielding.
Exactly.
Right?
And it needs to happen a lot more often, because usually my anger's in the way, my pride's in the way, I am not stepping down because I have got to get my point across. I have got to get my way in this, or whatever it might be. But the whole Philippians 2, Romans 10, you know, if I could go back to young me and brand that on my heart, I still struggle with it, of course, but brand that on my heart. I think back to so many things, you know, even little things like what the dinner hour is going to look like, or household chores, who's going to do what, you know, just little parts of life, little things and big things, how much smoother that may have gone.
Right. And also, I've had to realize this, that not when I've maybe advised other women, I realize not everyone is like John, and he's a leader, and he always wants to do what God wants him to do. Of course, he's human, and he's not always done everything perfectly, but it made me think, what about women who have husbands that are not going to follow God's plan? You know, how do you respond in a situation like that? And you still have the responsibility to be the person that God wants you to be. And in those cases, I think you really do lead the way and show your husband who doesn't respond the way he should. You can still respond the right way. You can still be the person you're supposed to be, even if he's not. In fact, I mean, that's what Christianity is all about. I say it's not all about that, but there's so much about being a Christian that is doing what you know you need to do, regardless of what the world does around you. and sometimes the world is in your home. So I think it's just so important to have, like you said, have these branded in your heart, so that regardless of how someone treats you, regardless of how your husband speaks to you, it's harder. I can't even imagine how much harder it must be when the husband in the home is not a Christian, who's not interested in following the plan of God. But you can still control you and be the person that God wants you to be. So I think that's just a challenge that we're all going to have it. Even if we have the most wonderful man in the world, there's going to be times that we have to lead the way. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and it's smart to mention that part too, because, we need to remind ourselves we're not trying to follow these thinking of others versus in order to get something back.
Right.
Ideally it works that way. Ideally that he responds in kind and there's unity, and I'm sure that's God's plan, but that's not why we do it. We don't do it to get something back. We don't do it because our husband is worthy of it or earned it from us. We do it because of who we are and trying to be Christian women.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not always easy.
Well, that part is never easy.
Right.
It's always a challenge. But I was thinking too about all of those things that you read about in Ephesians 4 and Colossians 3, things that we're to attitudes that we're to have and to put on, and they may have been addressed to the church and how we're to be in the church, but they're so applicable in marriage too. So it's not just how we treat one another in the church, but it's how we treat our families and our husbands. So yeah, I would go back, and there's a lot of things that I think I would do differently, but at the same time, sometimes you just have to learn them the hard way, don't you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm raising my hand. And, I feel the need to say this, and it's probably unnecessary, but I'm going to say it anyway. When you brought up this topic, and I'm glad you did, I'm sure that we will talk about marriage a lot on this podcast. But, we're almost 31 years in and still changing, striving, and learning. And, I can look back. We talked about maybe calling this episode Dear Me, you said, because, dear me, dear young me, just married. What would I go back and tell myself? I look back over the years, and I have a lot of moments that I'm not proud of in marriage. And a lot of growing ahead and things that I know in my head, but don't necessarily, brand on my heart and act out in real life. And for those moments, I'm so grateful for God's grace, that we've mentioned, I think, on almost every episode so far, because Neil's going to let me down. I've definitely let him down on multiple occasions, but we're both the next morning trying to put God first and keep striving to love each other. And, I think that we can be thankful for that even when we don't get any of these things right that we've talked about, even when we're still trying to figure some things out, you might get one area figured out and then something else happens. If we keep leaning on God and turning to his word for direction, then I think ultimately he's gonna take care of us, and he's gonna help us through.
Absolutely. It's hard to put into words when you've seen so much damage and destruction around you, and when you and I have seen a lot, just because in the ministry positions or the ministries that we've been involved in, you typically see more, and you counsel, and the things that are going on, and the hurt that's going on in families. And there's just so many times that I think that if husbands and wives just loved one another and followed the plan that God gave us to serve one another, to have the heart of Christ, and to be a servant and be humble and to grow in love, that would just solve so many other problems in the world and in our families, and the trauma that kids are enduring because their parents are hating on one another. And we don't pay enough attention to having a good marriage. And I think that the world also just it's just so easy to throw it away and to be selfish and to not want, because I'm unhappy in this marriage. And I know there's so many people unhappy in their marriage, and they don't have a partner that is trying to be Christ-like. And my heart goes out to them, but I still feel like turning back to the pages of the Bible and knowing what God wants us to do and how he wants us to act and how he wants our families to be, it would be so much better for everyone. And I know I feel like I'm rambling here, but it's just, I've seen so much hurt, and it just breaks my heart. And I know what the solution is, and it's just frustrating to know what the solution is, but you can't make people do that. Sometimes I can't make myself do it.
Right. And just remembering that we're a team. We really land ourselves in a lot of trouble when we start feeling like we're at this tug of war all the time, and it's my way and your way, but we're on the same team. And if I hurt him, I'm hurting us. I'm hurting our team. And, and even in our biggest, I look back at things that might be considered bigger hurdles or, lowest points or rockiest moments or whatever. I've just always felt like Neil's my best friend. And if things aren't right with us, nothing's right in the world,
Exactly.
just even when I've been frustrated or angry or, I just really want everything to be okay with us so that everything can be okay with the rest of my life. And I'm not saying that should ever take the place of your relationship with Christ. I'm just saying that that's how close I want us to be. And then when things aren't right, they're off, it just feels like it messes everything else up.
Yeah. Well, I know that, like you said, there'll be a lot of times that we talk about marriage because it's something that's just really important to both of us. And we're both blessed in having a relationship with our husbands that, like you said, we're best friends. And when things are not right there, then everything else just feels like it shuts down. But it's because we've worked on that. It's not because we're just lucky. You and Neil and John and I have worked on having a solid marriage, and we have set other things aside and made it our purpose to be one and to grow our relationship. So I guess I don't want people out there to think, well, you're just lucky because you have good men. And they are good, but we have worked hard to have a good marriage. And I think it's just it needs to be so important to everyone out there. Every Christian out there who is married, who wants to be married, needs to realize that this is just at the very top of the totem pole as far as what we need to be working on. But
yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to say, is that even when you just mess up or you think you've really botched it, if you're just trying hard, when you get up in the morning, I'm starting over, I'm going to put God first. I'm going to let that be an umbrella over my demeanor and everything that I say and all that I do. Then that you're doing your best.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about trying not to go over an hour.
Where are we now?
We are about 50 minutes in. So maybe we need to just kind of press pause on the marriage discussion and bring up our random question, which is...
That sounds good. Which is, what is the most unusual thing you have ever eaten?
Yeah, well, you know me. I'm not a very adventurous eater. So can we change it to what's the most unusual thing you've ever smelled?
Sure.
Is that a no?
No, go ahead. I guess.
Well, I went to Singapore in 2018 and I smelled durian.
Oh, yeah, that big fruit thing.
Yes.
Oh, gross. Did it smell bad?
It's one of the things that I remember when I was real little and we would walk through the grocery store, and I remember one time seeing tripe, which isn't that cow intestines?
Is it stomach or intestines? I don't know.
it's something from the inside of a cow. And I remember saying, "Oh, that's disgusting." And my mom, I was probably about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, and mom said, "Carla, there are people who like that. So don't talk about it that way." And so I have always felt like, and she's right, because there's a lot of people that make stuff that they like, and I don't understand it, but that's their choice. So I have a hard time saying, "Ew, that's disgusting," but, and especially because I love the people that love durian, and they love it. They make ice cream out of it. They,
But
they
don't
have
they
all
even
kinds of,
agree that it stinks?
yeah, but they say it tastes good.
Yeah.
I think that John one time said that someone told him there that eating durian is like standing in the sewer with dirty socks around you and tasting something really sweet, which, yeah, that does not do anything for me.
That's not persuading
try
me.
it. No, but every marketplace that we went past, because it was in season when we were there, and every marketplace we went past, it really did turn my stomach. But apparently for some, and just like anything else, we just all have our own likes and dislikes. And I think that's the only place I've ever heard of people eating it, but I'm sure that there are other places. But they even have like laws. You can't take it on the subway. Yeah. So that ought to tell you something right there.
That'll tell you something.
Yeah. But so I apologize to my friends who are in Singapore, because I really do love you dearly, but I don't like your fruit there. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. That's a good answer.
What's the most unusual thing you've ever eaten or smelled?
My answer is zebra.
Oh.
And I ate it. I didn't smell it.
Did you know you were eating zebra?
Yes, we were in Tanzania, and I think the name of the restaurant was the Flame Tree. And we ordered zebra medallions. So it was unusual in the way it was prepared also, because they were really thinly sliced round medallions on a platter, and they had some kind of oil drizzled over the top of them. They were really dark in color, like a dark brick red kind of a color. So I didn't like the way it tasted, though. It tasted extremely gamey. Yeah. I've tried a lot of different meats in various travels and things, but that one stands out to me as the most unusual in a bunch of ways. Well,
you have a much more adventurous palate than I do, and I want to be that way, but I don't know. I think mine is more of a texture thing. That as far as things that I don't like, it's not the flavor of things that I don't like, but the texture. And I guess I'm a little sensitive to that too, because certain family members that will remain nameless, but will say, "I can't believe you don't like that. Why don't you like that?" And how do you explain that? Some things you do and some things you don't. So I'm pretty conscious of not.
You come back with a sarcastic answer. That's what you do.
Yeah. Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I probably have. Why do you like what you like? But anyway, it's just one of those things that there's certain textures of things that just make me kind of almost gag, and I can't get past it. There was one funny thing in Israel on the buffet. Sometimes they'll have tongue, cow tongue. And I know lots of people like that too, but it just looks like the way they serve it. It just kind of looks like you serve liver and onions, or trying to think what else, but just little thin slices. And we laughed and laughed and laughed one time, because one young man that was with us had put it on his plate, and he took a bite of it, and you could see when he was chewing, he didn't really like what he was eating. And somebody said, "Oh, you know what that is, don't you?" And he said, "No." And this man said, that's tongue." And this young man, turned a different shade, and he was thinking, you could just see he did not like the thought of eating tongue. And so someone said to him, "Well, just try not to think of the fact that while you're tasting your food is tasting you." So I'm a little suspicious of some of the foods on the buffets there, just because you don't know what it is. So with that, we can wrap this episode up, but we are just very thankful for all of you who have hung in there with us and listened to us today and joined in with our discussion. And we wish that we could just sit around a great big table with all of you, and maybe someday in heaven we can do something like that. But would you do us a favor? If you have enjoyed the podcast, would you please share? And all we want to do, Kathy and I pray about this before each episode. We pray that we can bring some light to your day, that we can encourage you, that we can glorify God in what we do. And that's all we're trying to do here. So we would just appreciate it if you've enjoyed and you think that we've had some things that might be helpful to others. Would you share and let other people know about it? We have a Facebook group that's called Looking Up, has an exclamation mark, Looking Up with Kathy and Carla. You can join our Facebook group. We're on Instagram, and we would love to hear your thoughts about the things that we've talked about today. And we'll share things in the show notes. We'll put them on the Facebook group. Can you think of anything else we need to wrap up with, Kathy?
Well, if any of our listeners would like to share the most unusual thing they've ever eaten, I'd be interested. Or smell, I'd be interested. Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe even some things that you might go back and tell yourself is something that you might have wished you had known earlier in marriage. Or we just love hearing from you and hearing your thoughts. We enjoy that very much.
Yes. So with that, we want to encourage everyone until next time to keep looking up.
I look forward to chatting with you next week, Carla.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Love you. Bye. Love you.